Speaking about people destroying the West, I've got my little section on Starmer here, or I call him Starmer the Bastard. I don't know if that's inappropriate, but
people are calling him Keith Stalin.
Keith Stalin, or Keir Stalin.
No, Keith Stalin.
Why Keith Stalin?
I don't know.
There's lots of names for this guy, aren't there? But one thing, I mentioned to you this last time, and I was quite shocked. I have my little black pill guy who sends me stuff, basically, and he's got this global fear of what's going on.
He's pink pill now because
he's gone a bit pink.
We're dragging him out.
He was very upset by you calling him a coward several times in the last time we talked.
Was he really?
Yeah, he was. Don't
tell him where I live.
It's a shame because he thought very highly of you before that. He was like, "What?" So, but that's good. The fact he's reacted means he still has a semblance.
Well, now I'm saying he's pink pill because he's not as black as you said he was.
I'll text him later and saying Nick says you're pink now.
Yeah.
So he said, "Oh, did you see Starmer saying he prefers he loves Davos, and Davos is where the World Economic Fund."
So when he was asked, he said, "Do you prefer Davos or Westminster?" And he went Davos.
Yes, yeah. And there wasn't any hesitation.
Yeah, there
wasn't any qualification. And I was and it was by that imbecilic newsagent lady, Emily Maitlis, was asking the question. It's Emily Maitlis and John Soap, listen to it. They run that awful shill programme for the government called Newsagents, and pretend they're not anything to do with the BBC anymore. They're free now, they're liberated from the BBC now. They'll just go somebody else and push the same crap as before. So it was one of those sycophantic interviews with one communist to another communist, basically. And yes, she said, "Do you prefer Davos or Westminster?" And he said, quick as a flash, Davos. And I was shocked. Because I thought, does he realise he's on camera here? He's saying that for the world to hear, that this guy's affiliated with the world, what's it called, the World Economic Foundation or whatever. More than his own country. But he was happy to say it.
And that's because you need to understand what he means by that. So what he means by that is eventually he would like to see the world under one nation, with no countries, no borders, and with the human race, no other races. So basically a communist planet where we can distribute wealth from the north to the south. There'll be no need for migration because we'll all be equal. We can build up the poor countries. Richer countries may become slightly poorer, but that'll be worth it. There'll be no more wars, no more disease. It will be a world utopia. Who wouldn't want that? The WEF are aiming for that. The UN is aiming for that. And maybe in 100,000 years, maybe we'll get to that. But it'll be a long, slow process. What these people actually want is to speed that up into a decade or two. And to get that result in a few decades, a few generations, will require force at a level we've never seen. It will take people 1,000 times worse than Hitler to be running the show to get us there. We're going to have to remove everyone's human rights, everyone's responsibility, rob people, take away all their power, all their resources, all their capital, to get to a world communist state. We'll all be starving. It'll just be like the Soviet Union, but on a global scale. But these people think they're doing good. These people really think if I can have more power, I can help this come along, and we'll avoid the mistakes of the past, and we'll get utopia. They've got no understanding of human nature. They've got no understanding of history. They've got no understanding how long these things take. These developments take a long time. And that's why he said Davos, because he wants a world government.
And he wants people to know that's what he wants as well.
Because everyone who's important agrees with him. And that sends the signal out to everybody else.
And to his followers as well.
Yes.
But the thing is, I suppose the issue is with someone like Keir Starmer, and his name alone tells you he was named after Keir Hardie, wasn't he? A very eminent Labour politician.
Was he, right?
His parents were both left-wing, possibly communists.
Yeah.
So he's been brainwashed since childhood. Yeah. This is the way it should be, son. Yeah. and he's a bright guy, and he's gone on and he's learned. He's become the director of the CPS, all that sort of stuff.
He's always been involved in many of these organisations since university, all the way through his life.
And he's kept this idea in his head all the way through, and now he's in power, and he's doing it.
It's a religion. It's an ideology. It's like a religion.
And he's robotically got in power now, and he's starting day by day. He's only been in,
60 days or something?
60 days, and he's already doing it, and he's like, I'm doing this, and I don't give a shit, if anybody doesn't care about it, because I'm doing it. I've got 5 years, I'm going to do what the frick I can in that time, and I'm starting now, and the first thing I'm doing is stopping people saying anything negative about what I'm doing. That's what he's doing first, isn't it?
How did he get into power?
He was voted in.
How did he... Technically,
okay.
but his journey, how did he become an MP? How did he get the support to be voted in to be Labour leader? All these things were planned because he is a manager. He is not a leader. He's not a visionary. He doesn't have ideas. He's implementing a playbook, the Marxist Communist playbook. He was picked to be the leader they wanted. And then they've supported him, they've funded his campaigns, they've silenced critics, and these people are, WEF, all these agencies, all the elite. He was anointed a decade ago to be, he's the Prime Minister we would like in this country. And he's been on that track ever since. He's not someone with ideas, he's someone who's going to implement what the people who put him into power want him to implement. It just turns out he believes in all that anyway. So he's not a paid informer, he's not a paid traitor. He believes in all that. They picked the right man for the job. And that's where we are now.
I mean, just saying that is actually what you're saying is quite chilling. And I actually think now, you're right, all this stuff is planned out by the people who want to create this global communist state, basically. But it reminds me of Day of the Triffids. Day of the Triffids, where the Triffids take over human beings, and you can't tell. You can't tell that somebody's a Triffid or they've been taken over unless you're in a crowd of them, and then suddenly one of them points at you and makes a screaming noise. Have you seen that? They are like the Triffids, aren't they? They're all, they've all got this idea in their head, and they're slowly taking over positions of power all around the place, so they can impose this world order on us, basically. And he's been selected, and now he's the Prime Minister, and he's doing it, isn't he? And he's getting on with it.
This isn't new. All power structures do this.
Yeah, but also, if you go on a picket line, or if you go on a protest and say, stop letting ignorance in, all the Triffids point at you, don't they, and say, get him into jail. Yeah.
Unclean.
Yeah. It's just horrific. The way you've just described it now, if you'd have said that to me 3 or 4 years ago, that he's been selected or whatever, I'd say, that's just nonsense, he's blooded or whatever. But you're right, he has.
And that's not just him. Many of our politicians have been selected for the same thing. They just don't happen to have the luck to get to that position of power.
Yeah.
So powerful people, powerful organisations are always supporting certain politicians because they know it's beneficial if they're lucky enough to get through and things go their way. Then we've got one of ours on the inside.
Yeah. And somehow he's made it through.
He has.
With hardly any votes.
Yep.
With hardly any votes.
Yeah.
He's just, they've got him through, haven't they? It's just unbelievable. But just talking about Starmer, the Davos thing, obviously, which is quite...
But it could collapse very soon, because have you heard today, he's announced that he's going to let Parliament vote on if they take away the winter fuel allowance.
Oh, really?
There's going to be a vote on it.
Really? That's interesting.
There's already Labour MPs already going, I'm not voting for it.
Really?
So he still may win because he's got a big majority, but we'll see how many Labour MPs rebel. Is this the beginning of the end? Is this the beginning of...
Why would he do that?
But he's been forced into it.
That's
His MPs are forcing him into it.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
What he also did this week was remove a portrait of Margaret Thatcher from...
Yes.
Now, you were, when we first did this, we've already discussed this, but we're discussing it again.
But let's pretend we've not.
Let's pretend we're not, but I'm going to bring in what you said. So you kind of said, when I first saw this, I thought, this is a sign of a weak man. This is a sign of a man who hasn't got the mental strength or energy to understand that no matter what he thinks of Thatcher, and don't forget he'll have been indoctrinated, because he's probably about the same age as me, this guy, so he'll have been indoctrinated by his parents, Thatcher's a bastard or whatever, all that sort of stuff, as I was when I was at university and stuff like that. So I thought, this is a man who isn't strong enough to say, well, I understand she did that, but she also did a lot of good things for the country. She was a Prime Minister. I'll give her the level of respect she deserves, and I'll leave her portrait, though, even though I'm not a fan of hers, I'll do that. But he couldn't do that, no. He's so weak and shallow, he has to get the portrait taken down and taken out. Now, I presented that as my thesis to you. You shot me down in flames. Yeah,
because my answer basically was, this is a PR stunt. Well, first of all, it's his home. He's become Prime Minister. He's entitled to have the art on the walls that he wants. And he can take down people he doesn't like. He can put up people he does like. And that's down to him. He's earned that right by becoming Prime Minister. The fact this was leaked to the press is a PR stunt, because that sends a signal to all his followers like, look, I still hate Thatcher. Now, it also triggers the right wing. The right wing now are all going on about, how dare you take down Thatcher, the greatest female Prime Minister, the greatest Prime Minister since Churchill. And what he's done there is called misdirection. He's then got all his enemies talking about paintings instead of talking about his policies, instead of talking about who was locking up for being white on the streets and shouting. So this was a great distraction technique that lasted a week, where all these enemies now are talking about artwork and not criticising his policies, his government, his choices, his decisions. It was a win-win for him. Of course, the right wing are going to criticise him for taking down a portrait, but at the end of the day, who cares?
Yes,
who cares?
You're right, it's not important.
It's a little bit like Labour now talking about Oasis tickets and how they may be looking at nationalising ticket sales and spending time on this and that. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's now taking away criticism from him, his government, the winter allowance, which was talked about. They'll always come up with these little stories that are meaningless.
Distractions.
That are distractions. And all governments do it. Governments do it. And we need to be clever enough to see behind the scenes, and we need to make sure we're not distracted when we should be talking about policies and real life decisions they're making that are damaging the country and damaging people. Yeah.
It's a form of the nudge, I suppose, isn't it? It's a similar sort of thing.
It's propaganda. It's basically propaganda. If we can make the people look at the shiny things, don't look over here, look at the shiny things.
Don't look into my eyes, it's interesting what you said about him having a referendum on not a referendum, but a vote
in Parliament.
Yeah. Because also his stats are really bad out there now. So 2/3 of voters now believe that the government is more interested in being self-serving, basically, than in the ordinary people. And in addition to that, his personal approval rating now, this is Keir Starmer, is down to, I'm going to call him Starmer the Triffid from now on. The personal approval rating of Starmer the Triffid is now down to -16. Yeah. It's down 27 points, percentage points, from the election when he was +11. That's massive, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he, even though he is robotically plodding on, the people are not liking it.
They're not liking it. Taking the winter fuel allowance to a vote in Parliament, if he wins, is very clever. Because then he can bat away what he did by saying, Parliament voted for this. This wasn't me imposing this. I know I supported it, it was my idea, but Parliament voted for this. That's a great bat away. So, but he has to make sure he wins, because if he doesn't win, it'll be a very short premiership, because that'll be a knife in his back. And everybody will be hoping to get rid of him.
But he has such a massive majority.
He does, but how many of those Labour MPs are radicals? How many of these Labour MPs are true far lefties and saying to themselves, I can't vote for this because I'll never be voted in. How can I go back to my people going, yes, I voted to take away winter fuel allowance? How can I vote for this when 6 months ago I was in Parliament criticising the Tories for talking about removing the winter fuel allowance? So we forget sometimes, many MPs have morality. We may not agree with their morality, but they stand for something. And a lot of them know they've got to go back to the people.
I mean, if you'd have won your election, your parliamentary seat, would you have voted for the winter allowance removal? Let's see what. Yeah. You're worrying about currying favour with Keir Starmer.
No, because the winter fuel allowance, it's very hard to remove any benefit.
Yeah.
Once you give a benefit, it's very, very hard to remove it. We never should be giving these benefits in the first place.
I know, but they've got it now.
But they've got it now. So would I vote to remove it? I don't think I would. If I was Starmer, what I would do with many of the benefits we can't remove is I would say there's going to be no more inflation increases. So that benefit now will stay that level and become less and less important over time.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can foresee we get rid of some of these benefits. We don't go into government to make people poorer, So it's very hard to remove a benefit.
There's a hilarious meme I saw on Twitter. Not that I'm on Twitter, but I think Anna sent it to me. And it says pensioners guaranteeing they'll stay warm this winter, and it's a dinghy full of old age pensioners coming in. And I just thought that's hilarious. That is.
Yeah.
I don't know if have you seen it.
I've not. I posted about it. So pensioners in the boat.
Yes.
Have got the ferry over to France.
Yes.
Buy a dinghy, come back over and claim asylum because I know they're going to get a hotel and heating and
stay
everything
warm
like
this
that.
winter.
Yeah.
I know, it's just like it's brilliant because it's like a dinghy full of bunch of little old ladies with pink hair coming over.
When jokes hit a nerve like that, you know it's the wrong policy.
That's a good point.
Financially, it may be the right policy. I mean, we've got some Labour MPs been on TV going, the reason why we're doing this is because if we give pensioners this benefit this year, the country could go bankrupt and we could collapse.
Yeah.
Some MPs have said that with a straight face.
Pathetic.
On the news.
Yeah.
At the same time, while we're giving, is it 20 billion to Africa to stamp on climate change, as well as 1.5% of the money we earn, we're still giving to foreign aid, and we're still doing all those things.
Well, it's worse than that. This is something we talked about last time. £8 billion over budget has been spent on asylum seekers and illegal immigrants since 2024. So that's £2 billion a year. Sorry, still since 2020. £2 billion a year overspent. This isn't total spending, overspent. Just
over their massive budget anyway.
So we are spending. We are in this country. We're spending £2 billion on asylum seekers per year over budget, and we can't afford to pay our own pensioners 1.4 billion.
Yeah. How is that fair? Yet at the same time, MPs can claim heating allowance.
I saw that
for their second homes.
Yes, correct. So MPs, most of the Labour MPs have been claiming heating bills for their second homes on their parliamentary expenses, right? So we can't give little old ladies a heating allowance at Christmas, but they can claim for their heating on expenses.
But for my second home, which the taxpayer pays for, I'm also making them pay for the heating of that home.
I mean, they are just such bloody hypocrites.
When you discuss
Angela
these
Rayner's
things,
in the heart. She's taken one of the biggest allowances of all.
Yeah, but when you start highlighting this, it shows the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
It shows that these people are not in this position to improve the lives of ordinary people. They're not, because how can you make these decisions?
Yeah.
To make that decision with heating allowance, the first thing they should have done is we're scrapping the heating allowance for all MPs for second homes.
Yeah.
Next week, now we're scrapping that. That would be a little bit more...
Lead by example.
Yeah, exactly. Lead by example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing I was admired about Tony Benn, because he never claimed anything on expenses. Because he was very principled about that. I know he was a wealthy man anyway, but that's one thing I always liked. I didn't particularly like his politics, but I like the fact he did things like that. He wasn't a hypocrite.
Yes.
But they're just such grubby hypocrites. It's like Angela Rayner. She's now stopping this right to buy thing. Have you heard about this?
Yep.
right to buy. She exercised right to buy for her council house and made 50 grand profit.
Yeah.
But she's taking that right away from everybody else in the council, which is just, just unbelievable. So something else Starmer's trying to do now, he's trying to get workers to take a 4-day week. And I think this kind of ties into what you've been saying about this communist world, this global communist, what's the word I'm looking for? Nirvana, this fantastic utopia, that's the word I'm looking for, where basically, and part of that is the fact workers only have to work 4 days a week as well. And of course, the point I made about this is, the people this appeals to most are those in the public sector. Yes. Because it's like, fantastic, working from home, and now I get to have a 4-day week as well, if I decide to do it. Yep. Because of course these things are always rolled out to the government first, aren't they, basically. So we have this massive public sector budget cost. 10% of the population now works for the government in this country. And now, hey lads, you've got your nice pensions, you've got you're working from home, and now you can have the right to have a 4-day week if you want to do it.
Yeah. On 5 days pay.
On 5 days pay. Oh, sorry, yes, on 5 days pay, 4-day week, 5 days pay, basically. Yeah. So you get the same pay as you get at the moment, but you don't have to work 4 days. Yeah. Meanwhile, everybody else, me, you, the guy in the supermarket, the girl in the supermarket, the garage mechanic has got to work 5 days a week, as always.
And pay more tax.
And pay more tax.
Because we need more staff now to fill that extra day when you're not working for the public sector.
Yes, well taken. And it's like, they're doing this stuff, and I'm like, can you not see what you're doing? But of course, in Starmer's mind, that's all he understands, isn't it? The public sector. That's all the only place he's ever worked, isn't it?
And the unions have funded his campaign, fund him in power. Yeah. So he's now paying back the unions. Most people in unions now are public sector. Yeah. So the unions now only represent the public sector, really. Yeah. Or their affiliates from that. This is another one of these crazy ideas. Because one of their arguments is working 4 days a week instead of 5 increases productivity. So working 4 days, I do more work in 4 days than I would do in 5 days. Right. And it's like, no, you don't, you liar. Yeah.
I can tell you right now, that's absolute bollocks.
You're the same sort of person who tells me a man in a dress is a woman. Yeah. You're the same person who tells me that certain women can have penises. Yes. Don't tell me you can do over 5 days work in 4 days. Don't tell me that.
But they say these things, don't they? With bald impudence, impudence about. Sorry about my phone. With bald impudence about a man can have a woman can have a penis. 4 days, you get as much productivity out of 4 days work as you do out of 5 days work. They just say these things, and nobody challenges them. No. Because they're just saying them to each other, aren't they? And believing it. It's just absolute bollocks.
Productivity in this country has hardly improved over decades and decades and decades. We're one of the most unproductive countries in Europe. Yes. And that's because we rely on cheap foreign labour. Yeah. Increased productivity means we've got to mechanise, we've got to use technology, we've got to create better jobs. So less jobs, but those jobs are worth more. Yeah. And you do that through machinery and through computers and things like that, not by making people work less hours. Yeah. This is just pure laziness on laziness on laziness.
Yeah. I'll just do this final section because we've got limited time today, and this section I call "Crush the Peasants." Take their money and destroy their children. Yeah. And these are things that's
government policy.
I know, they should have had it on their manifesto. They'd have still got it, wouldn't they?
Many governments over the last couple of decades, that's been their policy.
And I put crush the peasants here, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, but they do seem to despise the people, don't they?
We are peasants to them.
Yeah. They do think we're peasants, don't they?
They want to rule over us. Yeah. They don't want to represent us. They want to rule over us because they know best.
Yeah, it's just horrific. So one of the first things which really pissed me off is they're talking about this smoking ban. Yep. In pubs. Yeah. Outside of pubs. Now, I've never smoked, and I'm not a smoker, but I've always despised the way they attack smokers and the right to smoke. Something that is legal in this country. They stick those horrific taxes on them. They've more and more forced them into. They basically made them almost seem like lepers in society. They push them further and further out. Now, one of the last bastions of a working man, I'm not going to say working class, I'm going to say a working man, is to go to the pub, have a drink, and then maybe pop out, have a fag or whatever, pop back in again and have his evening. They want to take that away from us now.
Yeah.
Why? What? And of all the issues we are facing in this country, why this one?
Because at every dinner table in the middle class areas, smoking is seen as common. So there's many things that people do that damage themselves, that damage society, or the state has to then correct with taxpayers' money. And smoking is one of them. We know smoking is bad for you. The government has a duty to tell us smoking is bad for us and try to convince us that smoking is bad for us. I want government to do that in certain things because they have the evidence, they have the information, and it's their duty to give us that information, but then it's down to personal choice. I was in favour of the smoking ban in pubs and nightclubs because I've never smoked and I hated smoking. I used to come home stinking of cigarettes.
Yeah, I get that.
But I've come to the conclusion now that I was wrong then.
Gosh.
I've come to the conclusion that because it was a benefit to me, I allowed the government to take rights away from my fellow citizens.
Correct. Yeah.
And once the government did that, they started coming for some of my rights as well then. So I was wrong when that started. That's why I don't want this smoking ban to increase now. If we allow them to do this for smoking again, they've already started coming for alcohol. Alcohol is the only thing that makes my life worth living.
Yeah.
I'm a married man. If it wasn't for alcohol, at this present moment in time, my wife's not talking to me. At this present moment in time.
All right, okay.
And after we finish this, I'm having a drink. It's the only thing that'll get me through the rest of the evening. But they're going to come for that. They'll come for other things. Let me tell you another example. So we have pursuits in this country that are dangerous. Rock climbing, mountain climbing, biking, playing football at weekends.
Rugby. Yeah.
I worked with a
Boxing.
person at Manchester Council who was always at the hospital with his knees and his ankles because he was a semi-professional footballer. And all his injuries while he was being paid to play on Sundays were all being picked up by the NHS. Now, that's wrong, but should we stop him playing football or playing rugby or climbing a mountain because he's going to damage himself, he could die? Well, do you know what? As long as he's got the information and understands the consequences,
he can make the choice himself, which he already was doing.
He should be able to do what he wants to do.
But you say that's wrong. I don't think it is wrong. That's what the NHS is for, or that's what it was originally intended for.
The NHS isn't there to pay for a semi-professional footballer who's being paid handsomely.
Maybe.
He needs his own private insurance, and that's what he should be paying for. If you're a kid playing football in the park and hurt yourself, well, NHS is there for that.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's different when you're being paid for it. But the government will not stop. Another good example was when they were banning fox hunting.
Yeah.
They're now coming for fishing. So all the fishers, everyone fishing and light fishing, supported the banning of fox hunting, and people were saying they're going to come for you next. We're now coming for fishing. It's unfair on fish. They feel pain. You're torturing fish. So again, you can never give the far left enough.
Well, I was just thinking, I can imagine the sort of middle class with their glasses of wine talking about the smoking ban in a pub or whatever, and saying yes, it's correct. They shouldn't be allowed to smoke outside or whatever. But then 2 weeks later, we're coming for wine now, we're going to increase the price. And it's like, well, whoa. And that's the point, isn't it? Once you allow them to take that first step, that infringement of civil liberties, you could be next, couldn't you? That's the point.
Yeah, and at the same time they want to ban smoking, the same government and the same people want to relax cannabis laws.
Yeah. Why?
Because cannabis is connected to black people, it's connected to minority groups, is connected to other things, and those people can't be bad. We can't be seen to be persecuting those people.
A lot of brown people smoke cannabis.
Exactly.
So it can't be bad.
Exactly.
Because brown people, as we know, are always good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But how can you hold those two thoughts at the same time in the same head? Smoking's bad, we need to ban it and ban it and ban it and ban it. Cannabis, we're too strict on cannabis. We need to legalise it. You can't hold those two thoughts in a sane person's head.
But they do.
But they do.
So this is crush the peasants, take their money, destroy their children. Taking their money. Have you heard of the Wake in London?
The Wake in London, no.
So it's a memorial that Sadiq Khan is endorsing and supporting. It's going to cost £500,000.
Yes.
And it's commemorating victims of the transatlantic slave trade. But what it's not commemorating is William Wilberforce, the man who stopped the transatlantic. It's not commemorating the victims of the Barbary pirates who took 1.25 million slaves, 1.25 million slaves from Europe and from England as well. All it's commemorating is victims of the transatlantic slave trade, basically. And it's costing us £500,000. Yeah.
Transatlantic slave trade was started by black Africans. Every African slave was captured by a black African, enslaved by a black African, and sold to a white slave ship by a black African. Black leaders and black tribal leaders and kings and emperors in Africa were making a fortune. They didn't want to stop the transatlantic slave trade. They fought back. The British Navy had to create a squadron called the East African Squadron. I think it's like...
While you're talking.
Yeah. And they were the ones who were dying, stopping the slave ships, who were stopping the slave markets. That's why we stopped the international slave trade, because the black Africans didn't want to stop it. Just like they've not stopped it now. More slaves are alive today in Africa than ever in the history of the world. They're alive today. So should we should we commemorate the transatlantic slave trade, those slaves who suffered? I don't think we should point them out for special treatment. That should be about ending or celebrating that we ended slavery.
Yeah.
And there should be a footnote to that statue saying something like, and it's a disgrace we haven't ended it today in the world, and we've got more work to do. But not for Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan is a nasty piece of work, identity politics, and he's just looking after his voter base by saying transatlantic slave trade, they were the victims of white people.
Yeah, white bastards. Yeah,
yeah, they weren't. They were victims of their fellow black Africans. That's what they were a victim of.
Yeah.
And he's playing the narrative again that slavery is only about black people, victims, and white people.
It is. I mean, it's a slap in the face again for white English people, isn't it? We're going to take £500,000 of your tax money and put it into a memorial that basically says you guys are shit and we're shit all that time ago, basically.
But I'd expect nothing else from that man.
Yeah, yeah. It is. I mean, why not just spend the money on little old ladies' heating bills instead? You know, it's another £500,000.
Why not spend the money on raising a statue that lets the world know we have more slaves alive today, and we're not doing anything about it,
and we need to take action
because we're really doing nothing about it.
Yeah.
That's a shame on all of us. Why not raise a statue for that?
Yeah, because we don't want to look there, Nick, do we?
No.
The elite, the communists in this country don't want to look at those things. They don't want to look at the 100,000 Christians that have been killed in Nigeria by Muslims. They don't want to look there. They want to look at Palestine, don't they?
Yeah.
And see, you know, the people that have been killed there.
Because if you look at Nigeria, you'll be blaming black people.
Yes.
If you look at Israel, Jews are classed as white, so you can blame white people.
Yeah. That's a far more acceptable place to focus your attention.
Yeah.
And you're right. The problem with the stories now is we only ever get one side of the story, don't we? We only get a very focused view on something, and we're not seeing anything on the other side as well. And this is the way now history is defining itself, isn't it? We're choosing to focus on things that the elite and the communists think we should focus on, not on everything else that's going on. This is another example of it. We're talking about crush the peasants, take their money. The second part of take their money we've already talked about, which is the government spending £7.6 billion over budget since 2020 on illegal immigration and asylum seekers. Over budget, Nick, not the actual budget. What we've gone over budget by £8 billion.
Someone has to pay for all those hotels. Someone has to pay for the transport. Someone has to pay for the ferries to bring him over here. Someone has to pay for the security to keep the hotels safe. Someone has to pay for the private doctors, the private dentists to go examine them all and give them treatment. Someone has to pay for all the food. Someone has to pay for all the spending money each one is giving every week. Someone has to pay for the administration of all that. So all this costs money. This is why we have so many multinational companies involved in this. They're making a fortune. Chain hotels, poor crap chain hotels are making a fortune at the moment. They're all full every day of the year. And I used to think this was just purely communist and silly woke idiots accepting refugees and supporting them. And then I realised capitalist businesses are doing it now because it's a great way to make money. And it's a short-term gain, but they're filling government contracts and making a fortune.
And why wouldn't they? In the same way as we said, you know, why wouldn't the Muslims take advantage of the fact they're allowed to come here and practice their religion? Why wouldn't capitalists take advantage of the idiotic government giving them money to look after illegal immigrants? Why not? Why not? And I often think that myself as a businessman. You know, sometimes when we're taking government contracts, I'm thinking, you know, but then I think, well, why the hell not? Because they're taking tax off me to pay for things that I don't agree with. So yes, I'll have some of your money as well, the other way around. Why not? Finally, just on this bit here, you know, crush the peasants, take their money, destroy their children. 2 examples, I think, of how we're destroying our children. In Germany, Spain and France, nearly every village or town has got a public swimming pool and a leisure centre. Since 2010, guess how many the UK has closed since 2010?
Oh, loads. Hundreds and hundreds, probably.
1,000.
1,000.
1,000. So something that you and I think, enjoyed as a kid, as children, which was to go to our local swimming pool, have a great laugh or whatever. Typically, most families, most kids used to go, usually on our own at the weekend, to the swimming pool.
Mine was walking distance from my house.
Yeah, and it was an accepted way of life. It was a part of our civilization, part of the way we worked in this country. We would have very nice leisure facilities, nice swimming pools, and you'd go and have a laugh there at the weekend, and all kids could swim, and it was fantastic. They don't exist anymore now in this country. They've been destroyed, closed. You don't see them anymore. I don't drive do you drive past any? I hardly drive past any when I'm driving around.
No.
And it's like something that should be a right for kids, and especially kids on lower income or whatever, has been taken away. But for some reason, you know, Germany, France and Spain can still do it.
Exactly, they can afford it. It's all about priorities. You know, governments have got the money. It's all about where do they spend that money. Swimming pools are very expensive to run. I spent a decade working at Manchester Council, speaking to kids, doing consultations with them, what do you want in your area, and we meant things like more swings. And the number one thing kids would say to us in Manchester would be swimming pool. And I'd have to say to them, not a chance in hell. But it was always the number one, top of the list, wish list for kids. They all wanted swimming pools.
Yeah, of course.
Because kids like them.
Yeah.
Councils can't afford them because they're spending their money somewhere else.
Yeah.
But
how much would 7.6 billion buy in terms of swimming pools?
I'm shocked to hear European countries are still privatising that, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's a difference between our government now and governments in the past. Governments in the past used to prioritise British people, local people in their areas. That's what they privatised.
Yeah.
Our governments now privatise foreigners.
Yeah.
Privatise foreign problems, foreign continents, foreign people in those continents. The foreign aid we give. Last week, there was a story in the paper last week that we've been funding a women-only opera company in China. Who cares about opera in China? Who cares it's only women who are doing the opera? What's that got to do with us? 10 years ago, we were funding a girl group. They were called something like the Ethiopian Spice Girls. We were funding a Spice Girl in Ethiopia, a pop group, because they were going to show the Ethiopians about gender equality and all that rubbish. We keep funding all this crap for other countries, but yet we can't fund a swimming pool for poor kids in our inner cities. It's all about priorities.
I said this when we talked last time, but I want to get a summary of what we're spending all our money on.
Yeah.
Because these are billions of pounds we're wasting here.
Taxpayers Alliance.
Yeah.
They've got a website full of all this stuff.
I've actually emailed those guys, and I've said if you give us some data, we'll discuss it on this podcast. Yeah. But yeah, I need to understand how much money we are spending of taxpayers' money on crap.
You wouldn't believe the waste. I've seen the waste in a council, Manchester Council, and that was just me, my small budget in the council.
But don't forget, it's not just taxpayers' money, is it? It's also companies' tax as well. It's all the tax. Of the total tax this government takes in, how much are they pissing away on crap? We know it's billions.
Well, of a percentage, 10, 20, 30%?
Yeah, and then then there's a simple calculation, isn't there? Take that number, divide it by the number of people in this country, and what does it mean to each individual person in this country? What could it mean?
Yeah.
What could it mean in terms of swimming pools? What could it mean in terms of policemen on the street? What could it mean in terms of fixing the bloody potholes in the roads? What could it mean in terms of getting the National Health Service better? I'd be interested to see that.
The day you get those figures of how much is wasted, it's going to depress the life out of you. I don't think you've got any understanding how big that number is.
Well, I need to find out, because I need our gentle listeners, unless our gentle listeners actually do know what these numbers are. That would be useful if you don't mind. Last point now, coming to the end of this, again, crushing the children. Something again that upset me about what they're doing to our kids. The unions now want timetables and grammar tests scrapped in school.
Of course they do, because unions represent the teachers, and their job is to make their members' lives easier. So reducing their workload and making their job easier, well, more teachers may join the union. So it's self-interest. The unions are not there to help children. The unions are not there to create a better education system. The unions are there to make their members' lives easier. It's as obvious as that.
But can they not see what they are doing to our children now? So they're educating them with crap about trans, about critical race theory, about sexual identity, about all this bullshit, about being how if you're white you're worthless, all that sort of stuff. They're doing that to them. They're teaching them to be scared of expressing opinions, to give views. They're teaching them to dob in their parents if their parents say something that doesn't conform to government policy. And now the final slap in the face. Oh, by the way, they're also taking away their swimming pool so they can't even go for a swim at lunchtime with the teacher, which again was a thing we used to do at school. They're doing all that. And now they're not even going to frickin' educate them properly. So they're not going to know basic maths and they're not going to know basic grammar when they leave school. I mean, these children are leaving the schools with no equipment to tackle the outside world.
Our schooling in this country is absolutely appalling in general. There's some very good schools who are producing some very good educated students, but they're a minority. Most schools are just pouring out unprepared young people for the world. And some schools, a small percentage of schools, are basically holding centres for dysfunctional young people. And they just hold them for 7 hours a day, open the gates and let them go home again and lock them up again the next day. Our state education is appalling. I've worked in schools, I've seen it firsthand. The unions are not what you think the unions are. You've probably still got this imaginary concept that the unions are full of working class people. It's all about workers' rights and making sure they're not being taken advantage of. Those unions are long gone. They went 20 years ago.
Really?
Unions now only represent the public sector, really. And it's all woke nonsense. Most of their members are women, ethnic minorities, woke idiots. White working class men now are not members of unions. Those picket line people we used to remember from the 80s are gone. And if they do exist, they're not members of unions anyway. Unions now will not support members over free speech. That's what the Free Speech Union was created, because you can be a member of your union and you're being disciplined because you're saying men who wear dresses are not women, your union will not represent you on that. They'll say to you, you're wrong. Well, you're my union. I'm paying my subs to be represented. They'll go, well, no, we're not representing you for that because you're actually wrong. You're part of the problem.
Yeah.
The unions are indoctrination camps. Unions need pulling down. And there's one or two small ones who are still good. But all the ones we've heard of are not fit for purpose. They're part of the problem. But it's that hand in glove now with the public sector. So they're trying to keep relevant. Public sector becoming more and more woke. So therefore the unions have to become more and more woke to keep their members. And it's that symbiotic relationship.
I think what the tragedy is now, just talking about this bit, let's assume they get this in place. So we then have these kids indoctrinated, bullied, chaperoned, scared to speak, not taught properly, then leaving school, not particularly armed or educated to get a particularly good job.
So they have to get a job then in the public sector.
Then they have, yeah, it's true, some will get in the public sector, but the ones that...
And then join a union.
Yeah, that's true. But also, these people, these guys, so they're out there, they're not particularly in high skill jobs, not particularly well paid. And then something like Southport happens, those 3 girls killed. They see that and they know instinctively something is wrong. They want to do something about it. So they go on a protest, they're arrested and they're put in jail. That's how it works, isn't it now?
It does, except for the people who would go on that protest would never be in one of those unions in the first place.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about the kids who've come out of school as a result of the union.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. No, I know they won't go into public. So I'm saying these ill-equipped people who are sent out into the world and end up with not particularly high-paid jobs, they know something's wrong when Southport happens. They know something's wrong. They haven't been educated well enough or trained well enough to articulate it properly or react against it. And they react in a way, they were probably in that protest with me, some of those guys. And then they get arrested and thrown in jail for it.
How would things have transpired if that nutcase, that Rwandan nutcase, had gone to a top middle class area and gone to a dance school there and killed some kids whose fathers and mothers were surgeons, barristers, MPs? How would things have? How would we have reacted as a country, and would things have changed?
I don't know. That's an interesting question,
isn't it? I'm not giving it any thought. I've got to my mind. I'm going to give that some thought.
Yeah, you asked me a question. I've got no good answer to that. I don't know. It's an interesting point, that, isn't it? Because it was kind of like, again, for Starmer the Triffid, it happened in this working class area in the north. I'll go up there, put some flowers
and they're
down.
always dying anyway, because they're always killing each other anyway.
They're all shit anyway. They don't know what they're doing. So I'll go up, chuck some flowers down and bugger off again. And it doesn't really matter because it's not affecting me and my little elite group in London, is it? You know, I'm not being affected at all.
But what would have happened if Rupert and Farquhar had been murdered at a dance studio?
Don't make me laugh about things like that. No, you're right. It's an interesting question because it never happens there.
Would the middle class have then gone, right, enough now?
Yeah.
It's now affecting me and mine.
Yeah.
You know, if those kids can die, and that was, you know, a world famous dance studio, I'm sending my kids to something similar. We need to look at this now.
Yeah.
I wonder if things would have changed.
That's an interesting thought. And on that interesting thought, Nick Buckley and B, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Did you enjoy that video? I think you did. Come on now, hit that bell, subscribe, comment. Let's build this channel. I need more followers. I need more subscribers. Be part of the journey. See you soon.